Hello, this is a Gruntz version 2 intro to the new rules with an overview of what's different. Now, I'm doing this late on a Friday and after work today, and it's raining here in the UK in the summer. It's also, what is it, July the 19th, it's just about another hour left. And the set of draft rules which I'm sharing and some basic stats are really kind of an early beta. They've been played with a lot this year, but it's time now to sort of share them out. But they come with that warning that they are still early, so there'll be some bits and pieces in there that are not clear. There'll be some notes of mine where I've said things like to be confirmed or looking for feedback. So be prepared for some rough edges and loads of confusion. But this video is meant to help guide through some of that, because I'm going to fire up the files which I'm sharing, and then I'm going to go through them and talk about the differences and focus on a couple of key things. Now, the other absolutely vital piece of knowledge to go into this with, because this is round one really of a share, and I'll do more videos like this as more feedback comes in, is that this is about the infantry. At the moment, I have obviously included some vehicles in some stats, and there's vehicle rules, there's overviews for them. But I'd like this initial test to be playtesters giving the infantry a try. But it may be that you're experienced with Gruntz, the original version, and therefore you want to just get stuck in with the vehicles as well. So you can do, because there's a couple of stats for a tank and some other bits and pieces in the statistics I'm sharing in this initial share. However, have a look and see what you can do with some infantry assaults and movement and attacks first, because that would really help layer on your experience. So you would start with maybe the infantry, just a few squads each on each side of a force. Try them even with matching forces initially, and then maybe mix them up a bit, so you've got some weaker ones against some harder to nail forces. So that's what I'd like the playtest group to try, so that we sort of layered on things rather than getting stuck straight in to throw everything on the table and get confused. Right. However, there's another aspect to this, which is there's a work in progress stats file, which I'm not sharing yet because it has everything in there, but it's early days. So I'd rather, again, focus on what I've shared. And you can change what I've shared, because, you know, I've given, well, you'll see in a minute when I show the file, you'll see some things in there which are details on stats, and the tweaks could make to those could be, oh, well, I'll increase the skill, or I'll add an extra couple of figures in that squad, or whatever you're going to do. You could do that with what you've got, but later on, once we're through this first round, I'll share a lot more information about the other stats, so that you could just pick a different vehicle or a fly or whatever it happens to be. So there's a lot more coming, but I thought I'd try and stage the release rather than dump it all in, and then I can talk through what we've got so far, and then we can build on it. So I'm going to go over to the screen, which has the various different documents which I'm sharing, and then I'll go through those one by one and focus in particular on the real key changes, hopefully. Oh, and that's the final thing, of course, is that you may hate them. You may go straight in, oh, I never play with that, I'm never going to touch it. But I'd appreciate some patience and giving it a try, because there's a couple of things which I think are quite different, even though the core rules are the same. You know, you're rolling 2d6 and adding a skill to it. The damage process is the same, but mechanism around squad movement and squad leaders is quite different. And when you read it on paper, you might go, oh, that's just not going to work for me. I know, because I like to play like this. But however, please be patient and try it first, and then feedback. And then once I've got everybody's feedback, I can see where things are going. So that's my plea, really. Please try first, and then see how it plays and see what you think, because obviously I've been now playtesting and playing tweaks and things to the rules for the last year, and it's been interesting. Sometimes we've tried things out and just haven't worked, but we've kind of ended up with something that feels like it works, so that's why I'm sharing it now. So without further ado, more waffle. I'm going to dive in now to the details of the actual files which I'm sharing, and here we go. Right, so first off, hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, I can see the thing making noises. And so here's a selection of files which I'm sharing from Dropbox, so you'll get a link from there. And it's just as a top line overview, this is the one that you're going to spend your time reading and absorbing, which is the outline. None of it's formatted for the book, of course. If you've got the original book, that's handy too, because there'll be things in there perhaps that I've missed. But that's the Gruntz rules outline you want to look at to have a good read. But we can get in quicker than that because I've done a charts selection. I haven't had time to actually put the charts into the outline, and I may keep them out until I'm further through the process. So I'll dive over and see if I can find the details which I'm talking about. Conditions, close combat. So here's the absolutely good starting point to show you some of the differences. And this is really why I did this, because I wrote these panels as key differences between them. First of all, you'll notice, before I dive in, on this squad sizes here, we've got sizes 4, 8 and 12 squad members. They're the main new sizes. I fixed them at that. There's still flexibility, but because you could add a squad attachment or 2, which could take a squad of 4 up to 6. You could also take, there's a couple of other items that are perk related that might add, say, a shield unit to a squad as well, which would take its size up too. But for the type of play I was after and the layout, I've gone for these set sizes for now. So again, it's something to bear with initially before we move on from there. The other thing, obviously, some of these I've put here on moving my mouse around this location. That's representing a group base. And over here, we've got models in individual bases. So I have really focused recently on the group base playing, mostly because I was finding it increasingly fiddly moving individual models. And with my eyesight going and stuff like that, I decided why not base on the 4 models, 4 bases, 4 figures per base, as I've said. And that does 2 things. If I show you, get down to the oh, wrong view, that view. So what you've got here, bouncing away from that 4-man view on the chart, is that's giving you that view now, if I can get into it. Okay. So you can make these kind of little vignettes, dioramas, however you want to call them, on a 4-man team base like that. Now, before you jump out and say, oh, I hate circle bases, you can use rectangular bases, Flames of War bases, any bases you like. And our playtesting has been based on playing individual models versus these group bases, and we've tried to make the rules sort of not dependent on base specific sizes, so you can mix them up, mix and match really. I wouldn't want to play a force where you had some of your models on single pennies or cents and then some on group, but we've played a lot of games where we've opposed the group type bases against the single bases. So although we've added that flexibility, the plan is generally, with the way I'll be presenting the game as I go forward, is to have 4 men on a base like this, the smallest size fire team essentially. And then when you want to go up to 8 men, you just add another round base. And if you had 12, well, I'm going to go and fetch them. That's now the largest Grunt squad size, 12-man team with 3 sort of fire bases in there. And this is obviously over here, some Polish models from Brigade models there. And these are the FSE from Ground Zero games, like French equivalent of French Foreign Legion types. So that's the smallest size there as well, with 4. Now, coming back, I will flash back to the document. However, squad leaders are still single base, and that's absolutely vital, and that's how we've kept the rules able to work with people mixing and matching group bases and single bases. And they're also supernumerary, which means they're not counted as part of the squad size. So although they're vital key mechanically and a key mechanic to the rules, they don't add up. So if I was saying that was a 4-man team, 8, 12, that's a 12-man squad with 12 wounds, essentially, as per the Gruntz rules. The squad leader doesn't count for one of those wounds. He's always there until the squad's wiped off the table. So from a rules perspective, he's supernumerary as far as counting numbers, but he's key for positioning and firing, which I'll come on to when I switch back. So yeah, that's it. And I mean, damage measurement, you can put tokens on these, you can mark off the wounds on your stat cards and then only remove the base when 4 are dead. And there's various other things you can do. Plus, if you don't like 4-man teams, you could split this up further by putting maybe 3 on a base. And then, if you're not too worried, like I'm not too worried, about having accurate one-on-one figures, for example, with my power armors, let's find one somewhere. Digs away for his power armor in the drawer. So here's a set of power armor. Because of the size of them, I've just put 3 on a base. But for rules, I would call that a 4 wound team. But then that's up to you how you would do that, because you would just need to record that and make sure your stat cards are representing that this would have 4 wounds. And then when you're counting down the number of wounds, once it's had 2 wounds, the model would reach its breakpoint, which we can talk about as well in a moment. So that's the other thing to think of. You don't have to be locked to a 1 model per 1 figure on table basis. I could have probably squeezed 4 power armor on there if I really wanted to be representative, or I could use a slightly larger base, but I've sort of standardized on this one size base, which is, I'm just, here we go, finding myself a section of pad with some measurement on it. It's a 30mm base. In fact, these ones are perhaps 31, but they're 30mm essentially in terms of size is what I'm doing there. Warning, that was an error. I just used an inch measurement. It's a 40mm base. So yeah, you may have thought I was a bit crazy thinking that was 30mm. So yeah, these are 40mm bases, and they happen to be a washer in there. So yeah, it's like a normal washer. These ones are painted by a friend of mine, Russell, and he's put his name on the back of the base as well. And you can see the washer, steel washer under there. They're about the cheapest thing you can buy on bulk, which gives you a metal base. So I'm going completely off a tangent now because I want to be talking about the rules. So let's go back to the Raspberry Pi and talk about the rules again. So a little bit slow down again after that quick jumping away to the models. So back to that squad sizes, as I was saying. Smallest squad size 4. Plus a squad leader that doesn't count towards the numbers. So he's essentially a token, but a very important token on the table for how the rules mechanisms work. But you only need 1 squad leader per squad of up to 12. So you don't have 1 squad leader per 4. So if this was a 12-man team, you'd still have 1 single squad leader. So bases, as I've mentioned here, you can have the single bases still, and we've mixed and matched our games with that. If you prefer that flexibility. Plus, you can do the group basing. And like I've said here, just to be clear, it's not prescribed within the rules, but it's certainly my favoured way of playing myself at the moment. So squad coherency. Oh, by the way, this is a PDF, so most of all the documents are PDF at the moment. So squad coherency. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting, and so far we've played and we're liking it, but we'll see when feedback comes in how this works out. So everything's a 2-inch coherency. Now, of course, what that means with the larger bases, switching back to the other view now, what that means, I may have to, actually, if I flip this around, I'll be able to get it in focus so it's not looking crazy down here. That's it. So get these guys off and put this chap in here. So he's a squad leader. Let's get it in focus. And he can operate by having these squad groups of 4 within 2 inches of his base. And I say 2 within, it's their base edge needs to be inside of the 2. So that 2-inch area there, that's now out of coherency, and they must always be in coherency. So as soon as they're in there, you can see you've then got a very large spread of the models. But that's the idea, is to keep them within that coherency to the base edge, as we've been playing it currently. And the same applies if there were all single figures. You'd be able to spread them all around within a 2-inch area. So that's quite a large space to put a squad of up to 12. Although 12 is getting a bit tight, it can be quite well spread out in that area. And so that's that. That's the sort of coherency rules. Back to the view here, so you can see with 3 bases and a squad of 12 here, that's all in coherency there. And it's measured from the base edge of the squad leader. And all squads must remain in coherency, so you just can't move out of it. You've got to keep them on, unless there's a bit of blocking terrain or something that you just you can't. You'd have to pretend. You know, if there was a wall that you can't squeeze up to, you'd pull them up as close as you can. So this is it. This is the real drastic change. Right, here we go. This is where people will rage quit. So basically, to support the group basing plus the single figure basing, and also for speed, this really does speed things up. The shooting is measured from the squad leader. He becomes that point of fire from a squad, and that's where you then essentially then drag your ruler out from to measure against the target unit. And in the target unit, it's also against the squad leader. So when you first play this, there's a little bit of a shock factor, because you say to yourself, oh, well, those models are out in the open. Look, they don't have cover around them. However, I'm abstracting that element, and when you play with a lot of cover on the table, and I do play with a lot of cover with the terrain I've got, it does sort of work, because you end up focusing on where that squad leader's gone to for the cover of the squad. And it's sort of representative of, okay, a squad leader's got himself behind a wall somewhere. It means the rest of his squad are using that cover. And then you don't have to spend time saying, oh, well, 3 members are out in the open, 1's in cover, individual firing, and then worrying about different ratings for their cover. Is he in cover? No, +1, then rate 1 dice roll. They're not in, they're in cover, so they get some other kind of bonus. So it's all based for streamlining around the squad leader's positioning. And that means that if in this instance here, I was firing from this white squad leader down here, he's firing out of cover in the open to this squad leader down here. So he gains the benefit of a +1 for his cover if this man was firing back at him. If that squad leader was firing back at him, but he gets that open fire and free line of sight for being in cover. So that's the key biggest change. And also you then make 1 2d6 roll. So a squad of any size shoots using a single roll of a 2d6 plus their skill plus a squad bonus. And the squad bonus is where the differences come in for scaling up the size of the squad, which I'll get onto when I just jump into a little bit more detail on shooting in a moment. So if I switch back here to me, yeah, so this was the biggest shocker really when we first started playing, because I put a lot of thought into, you know, how am I going to adjust the rules to work in a way where you can use multiple bases, single bases, and move them around in a more streamlined fashion. And also, how do you just get over the fact that in a game with such small figures, you were rolling individually for each squad member, and I found that a challenge. So that was my main objective for these new rules, is to switch away from a single roll per squad member to something that was a group-based one. So that's how I've achieved it. It's all based on the squad leader. You fire from his position and you line up to the squad leader of the opposing force's squad that you're firing on. So that's it in a nutshell. But now we'll dive back into the detail again. So this is where things really sped up for us really in the game, and the whole thing feels a lot fresher, which hopefully it will be for everybody that has a play. And that's that you do your measurement for the shooting from the squad leader, but you also do it for movement. So for speed, you pick up your squad leader, you measure from the front of him, dump him where you want him to be. That might be behind cover, that might be, you know, out on the open on the road, wherever he is, and then you just form up the rest of the models in Coherency. And many show games and group games I've had of Gruntz where I saw someone measuring each model. Oh, I can go 5 inches. Oh, I can go 5 inches, individually moving each one. Now, instead of that, you just pick up the squad leader, move him, and then the rest form up around him. And that's where the group bases are really good fun, because you move the squad leader and then all you're thinking of is, I've got to get the rest of the squad on their group bases, these type of ones, within that with their edge of their bases within the 2-inch coherency of the squad leader. So just to sort of show that on the table, if I switch over and I'll move these guys out of the way. So all I would do is just very quickly go, he can move 5 inches, measure from the front of his base still to the front of his base over there. It's not from front to back or anything unusual like that. It's just from the front edge to the front edge there. That's a sort of 5-inch move. Plus they can move in different directions. So you could say, I'm going to go 2 inches there, and then I'm going to go, 2 inches in this direction. However you want to move, you can go wherever you like essentially. But splat that down sort of 5 inches away, and then that's all your measurement done. And if these were individually based models all over here as well, you don't measure for them either. All you need to do is make sure they get within the 2-inch coherency of the squad leader. So in case of these group bases, I just go, okay, yeah, that's in, and well, that is nearly in, I think, 2 inches, yeah. And from a perspective of when he's going to be firing out, I'm interested in his location for the firing, because he represents where the cover is for anybody aiming in at him. The rest of the guys are forming up in a squad, and of course it's abstracted. So in the example where I'm using the wall over here, and say if he was firing out in this direction, you might have one of those there, you might have one of these squads over here, and well, it's one squad of 12, so you might have that breakdown of the squad bases like that, but it's from this position. And if someone was shooting in this squad, well, this base as part of the squad, they would all benefit from the cover if the fire was coming in this direction from the top down over the wall. Now, if they had enfilade sort of fire coming in from the side at him here, all of these bases would suffer from being out in the open, essentially, because that angle of fire from the side means that they'd all get out in the open. But then the fire in, it's all targeting the one guy. And when I say targeting the one guy, I don't mean you are targeting the one guy. He's just he's the point source on the target unit that you're using to represent where you're measuring to. It's as simple as that. As far as your firing goes, it's abstracted. Your target firing that's coming in here against this unit, it's spraying against all of them. They're ducking and diving. They're all gaining the benefit of this wall because the squad leader is up against it. He gets that wall for any firing that comes in. He'll get some hard cover or soft cover, depending on how you've defined the wall. But that means he's moved in a way that he's benefiting his squad. They're all using that piece of cover. And as I said, it's abstracted, and you just have to sort of get your mind around that as you play a bit. And once you've played a few times, once you feel the speed of shifting units and following the squad leader, it sort of feels like it works. At least it does to me anyway. But initially you get that jarring shock where you go, oh, these guys are out in the open here. Really, I should be able to shoot at those because I want accuracy to be able to shoot at these guys here from my unit that's firing on these, and they've not got themselves in cover. But that's the initial jarring shock you get. But I think as you play it, or at least we found anyway over the last 6 months of refining it, it feels quite right, and you kind of think in your mind, well, there's no way on any kind of single or multiple basis that you can always represent everybody getting in behind cover. So as long as I know that the ruling is he's providing the cover, well, he's not providing the cover, but he's indicating the cover for the rest of the squad, then I'm kind of happy. So anyway, that's where we are with that. Go back to this and just again, firing cover. I mean, you can read into this as you go, but I wanted to provide positive pluses to dice rolls when something was out in the open, and basically just to mean that there's that little extra edge when you know, oh, I'm out in the open, I'm going to get a positive on this, rather than traditionally rule sets would possibly just give you a neutral roll. So you would just get no plus when they're out in the open and everything was a minus. I wanted to give people the feeling that they got that little bit of an edge once they've got someone out in the open. So you get a +1 to the skill roll when you're firing at a unit. However, anything obscures the base of the target, which is obscuring cover between the firing unit and the target, there's a -1. So essentially, if you get anything out there that's just obscuring the base, this isn't in this instance because it's got a clear line through there, but if this green line was going over this rocky patch and it was obscuring enough to cover some of this target's base, it means you haven't got complete out in the open. And there are more details on this in the rules. This is just a very quick view on the fact that out in the open gives you a +1 if there's nothing in the way, just as that positive. So coming down to this next bit, close combat and assault. So unlike firing, with close combat, you do measure from the squad leader to any point on the target squad. So essentially, this is where it differs slightly in that you're charging in to close combat against any of the target models. So positioning can be key at this point, and it does mean that you essentially... Oh, I've got thunder. I wonder if that's going to get recorded. Just as I said this bit, over a cloud, I get a bit of thunder outside. So if I had the window open, that would have made a really nice cracking thunder sound, but I haven't, unfortunately. Anyway, so back to the case at hand. So squad leaders, again, is where you measure your close combat move into assault from. You don't measure it from the main bulk of squaddies. You're measuring it from the squad leader again. However, he measures it to anywhere within 1 inch of the target squad. It doesn't have to be the other squad leader. It can be any other model in that base. But then he's obviously considered that your whole set of models is moving in. So we'll just switch back and just show that very briefly here. So I'll reduce the squad count down here to a squad of 8 versus a squad of 4 over here. And I'll say, okay, obviously I'd have much larger range in front of me. I'm just doing this in a kind of a small area. However, if this unit was activating and I was charging in, I'd measure from him. I'm going to get a going to get a really pointy stick. Oh, a brush. So I'd measure from his base edge to within 1 inch of anywhere on either, you know, even if that squad leader was hiding behind there, using that as cover, and this squad was out here. So if they were fired on, this guy was going to get some sort of cover bonus for being slightly obscured, because the firing is always between the squad leader and squad leader, representing a point of fire between the two squads. However, for charging in for an assault, you just measure to the nearest model in that squad. So that's where things differ there. And then, as I've said before, this is where the speed of play comes in. You don't need to measure these because you've measured this guy to get into combat. The rest just format as best they can, and you know you're not having to get every single model squeezed up and little fiddling around of individual bases, because this is now 2 squads in close assault combat, because he's moved within 1 inch of a base within that squad, and the rest of his models form up because they're representative of the size of the squad. So that's it. That's an assault going in, and again, it's quick and easy, because if these are all individually based models, as soon as I've done that piece, I could start engaging, and once I've moved within 1 inch with the leader, I could start rolling the dice and say, okay, well, I'm just going to move all my individual models up, because I know they're engaged in close quarters combat, because I've moved the squad leader in within 1 inch, and I've done the assault move as well. So again, it's another speed up moment there, because you're not having to measure individually for all these other figures in the squad, but you still get the feel of the squad movement and the action going on. So that's that. Okay, so as I was saying, unlike firing with close assault, measurements made from the squad leader to any location that was in 1 inch of the target squad member. So as I did on that demo there, I just moved it to within anywhere on that base, and then everybody else forms up. So line of sight again here, just a quick note on it. It's determined by the unit's base. If you can see any of the model's base, then you have line of sight. If you can't, then you don't have line of sight if the base is obscured. Again, firing with direct fire, you would fire against the squad leader. Indirect fire, which I think I'm not going to go into in this video, because indirect fire is really key now in the game, and I've got a new template for covering indirect fire, but I'm not going to do that reveal. That would be later. I would prefer Playtest to start with direct fire, and then we'll introduce indirect, but the rules are in the guide already, so you can have a play with it. But direct fire is a bit different now. But you may pre-measure any distance anytime, so you don't have to fire at something if you measure up and go, well, they're out of range, I can't do it. So you just measure and check. Pre-measuring is fine. When measuring, use the shortest distance between bases, and if they don't have any bases, then measure the closest point on the models themselves. And that's just a case of agreeing when you start a game that you're not going to be measuring from 5 inches out on the end of a huge long turret, which would be about causing the opponent to fire back at your hull or something, because that would be a bit cheeky. So it's just one of those fair things when you start that you'd say, you'd agree, okay, midpoint on the turrets of any of our tanks are going to be where I fire from, and therefore that's where you can fire back, because that's sort of level with my hull kind of thing. So that's just something to sort of agree, and no big deal. There's no change on the rules for that. So this is the charts file, and this will evolve, and just all these things I'm saying as well are obviously open for debate, tweaks, changes and everything. If you don't like it at all, then feedback, but I can't promise that I will change everything, because obviously I've been working hard to make these work in a way that I enjoy playing, whilst still trying to make a game which I think people will enjoy. But there you go, that's that. This is the other key one to use, which is kind of a quick reference thing if you're playing and you just want something beside the table. And really, this hasn't changed a great deal. I have changed a few of the names of things, but but basically squad actions are still 2 actions as they were before, move and fire, and you can do it in any order you like. You can, when you activate a squad, you can fire it and then move, or you can move and then fire. And movement is 1 action. You can move up to the squad move. Firing, you can shoot without squad bonus, or you can let rip, which is a 2 action. And I think the last Gruntz rules, you just got a +1. But what you've got now, and this is the key thing about squads, is that you add a squad bonus to either your skill or the damage roll. You choose just before you roll to shoot if you do the let rip, which is like a complete, you could call it suppressive, you could call it all out fire, you could call it open fire. I've called it let rip, and it basically means a squad is standing still using both their actions to fire as best they can on a target. So I'm going to dive out of this because all these are pretty basic. Well, not basic, but I mean they're not a great deal different from what we've got already. Double move, assault move, that was all in there already. I've got some initial easy rules for movement, and then there's the firing down here as well on this one. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted a rule set where you felt like you got a positive, and that's why I've put a +1. If there's a total clear line of sight between you and the target, it really does help you hit it. Difference now between soft cover and hard cover is that they both just provide a -1 on the attacker's dice roll and total score, essentially, when they're trying to target your guard. But they, if you're in hard cover, you get a -1 to the damage as well. So it's just as easy or hard to hit a model in hard cover, but they get a -1 on the damage that's coming in. And shooting to close combat, there's a chance that you can shock a friendly unit. And that's where I shall go to the conditions, because shock is a new stats. You get all these as well. Oh, turn sequence. Oh, I've got 2 lots of the turn sequence. That's not very helpful. Squad actions, charts, conditions. So this is in there. So really the conditions are the same, but I've just tidied up some of the phrases, because beforehand you'd said it's suppressed, you'd get sort of suppressed, and then you get wax tokens and that kind of level of detail. But now you've got a fresh squad and it's ready to take action. They can complete their 2 actions. Then you've got a shocked, so after modeling a squad is waxed, or when incoming damage is equal to a unit's guard, a squad is shocked and a squad token and a token is assigned to the unit. So basically then you can do the 1 action instead of the 2. Pinned means you've got 2 shocked tokens, so you then become pinned, and they can only spend their activation recovering from the pinned condition. So once you've had 2 lots of incoming fire that have done damage, you're pinned. Broken, and this is when you've reached half your size of a squad. You make, and this is a new phrase as well, I've called it metal now, which is a metal test, which is basically a morale test, but it's, you say that you're gonna, what's your metal like in terms of surviving incoming fire, and your gumption was another word I was going to use, but metal felt like it worked well for this test. And you make this when you're at half strength, and if you fail the condition, you move 4 inches towards your table edge, and basically that unit has 1 more chance to recover from broken when they next activate. If they do recover, they don't have to make another metal test during the game unless another perk or something causes it. And this has worked quite well for us as well. It's a nice clean way of saying you make that metal test when your squad's at half strength, and then you don't make it again. So it keeps it nice and tidy. If you manage to survive when that squad of 12 goes to 6, which is half its strength, you make a metal test, you pass it, they don't make another one for the game, because they've just basically, they've buttoned down and got into action and decided, well, we're not going to break now. You don't make it when the squad goes to another half strength. This one is out in the still up for debate. Snafu is now a vehicle conditions, because we've got in here conditions of when you can shock a vehicle as well, which makes them kind of come in line with the squads as well. But that will come further as we work through the playtest, and hopefully we'll start with what we'll start with is the infantry mostly. Well, that's what I'm hoping everybody will try infantry first. And this is the infantry squad bonus. I don't know what's on the bottom of conditions, but basically squad bonus is what you add to both your attack rolls and your shooting rolls, your assault rolls and your shooting rolls, depending on the size of the squad. So when you start with a very fresh squad of 12 models, plus the one squad leader, he's supernumerary, as I mentioned before, so he doesn't count towards that number, but he's in the squad of 12. That fresh squad that hasn't lost anything is getting +3, potentially, to either their shooting roll or their shooting damage, and they choose that when they're firing. So this works very effectively for a squad of 12 that's fresh on the table. They're at a greater distance. You would say, right, I'm going to use the +3 on the shooting this round, because you'd be out maybe a little bit further away from the field and you'd want to gain that bonus then. But as soon as they lose a member of that 12, they're down to 11, they're down into the +2 bracket. So they're then getting +2 on their bonus to hit, on bonus to assault. And then for a 4+ squad, they only get a +1 until they drop below 4 to 3. And it's it's dynamic in that it's in line with the squad. As you lose members, a 12 squad down to 8 would still have a +2 instead of +3. When a squad of 8 is between 4 and 8, 4 and 7, they would still get the +1. And we found this is basically the key differentiator that works for the new grouped squads, in the sense that you're just making one attack for the whole squad. And as you reduce the squad size, you reduce that bonus. And just over here, the condition overview again, fresh, full action or limited action. This really should say 2 actions or 1 action, because I'm keeping that the same. Early in the process of the development, I changed all the action names to be full actions or partial or limited, and it all got a bit confusing, and I think I've come back to the core rules now. So this should say, full action, which takes 2 of a unit's action, or 1 action. And essentially, as we've said before, when you're shocked, because you've got a shock token on the model, you only get 1 action, because and they lose their squad bonus. If you're pinned, which means you've got both of your 2 tokens on you, and you've had 2 shocks basically, you lose your entire turn as you recover. But as per the original Gruntz rules, a commander and other perks can remove pin tokens from squads within a certain range, so you still get that flexibility of moving your commander or another model close enough to remove a pinned token. And there's perks and things that help with that too. Just having a drink there. So yeah, have a look at this one. This is the conditions, and there they go. That's the main rules. That's the chart. This was the squad actions, as I said, which just sort of the sort of thing you want beside the table to see when you want to do a move. Is it costing 1 to do a move, 2 to do let rip, so you can't move and do a let rip. However, obviously the commander can put a command token still on a squad that's within a certain range of him, which can give them that bonus move. So, for example, I'll flip to the view here. If we had a commander nearby, say this guy here was the commander for this whole force, and he activated, he could put, tries to find some tokens while I'm here, he could put a command token when he activates, he could say, I'm going to drop this command token on, and I'm going to apply it to this squad here. You'd actually put it beside the squad leader, just to show that that squad leader had a token. Now, if they were pinned, and I have nothing representative for pinned, unfortunately, I'm going to use this token over here. Although, there we go. So basically, if this guy here is a little unhappy face, if that squad was pinned, this commander would be able to do 2 things. He's always got the opportunity to remove all pinned tokens, so even if they were shocked, plus completely pinned, he could remove all the tokens from them when he activates, plus then also add a command token onto them too. And what that means is that for that let rip action that across 2 actions, it means this squad could move its normal move using the command token, which gives them a single bonus action. They'd do their move, so move up to the edge of there, say. Again, you move the squad leader and the rest form up. Then he could let rip from this corner and essentially be using his outbound firepower, or the squad's outbound firepower, on the let rip mode, which means they get to add their squad bonus to either the shooting or the damage result because they're putting everything into it. So yeah, that's old school grunts anyway, that the commander activates. He can put a command token on a squad within a certain distance. They then get a bonus action. Plus, he can also now just remove from one unit all of its tokens. So basically he's picking a unit and just saying, boys, get up off the ground, or if it's a vehicle, get into gear, and allowing them to take a full action by removing the token. So in fact, what he could do when that commander activated, he could have removed, say, that was a pin token on there. He could remove the pin token, but give the command to another squad. So then this is getting its full action this turn because it's had the pinning removed by the commander. But he could say, oh, actually, I'm going to put the command pip additional action on another unit rather than this one. So he's basically given a sort of quick bonus to 2 squads on the table. That may have been a bit too much detail there. But if you're familiar with the old grunts, that's sort of in there anyway. So then the stats. So let's talk through these. I've got 2 sets of stats. Mostly squads and mostly kind of middling level statistics just to give people something to play with. But the human stats, there's a commander. He's just an infantry type guy. Normal pulse laser. Then we have 2 recon squads, which are they've got a high guard. And when I say 2, you could use 1. I've only put 1 damage row on for them. And also I think I've put that damage box in the wrong place. It should be at half strength, which would be after that last 4th one has gone there, once you filled it in there. So that X should be there. Apologies for that. There's a couple of instances where I've done that and I've not lined up the X's in the right places. However, it's at half strength, so you know when you've lost 4, so all those 4 are gone, you're then going to have to make that metal test. But I'm diving into detail here when I should go straight into 1 to avoid confusion and talk about it. So guard is your traditional guard. That's the target number that someone has to hit when they're running at you or shooting at you. They roll a 2d6, add their skill, and they need to equal your guard. Soak is when they're doing their damage roll, which would be 2d6 plus the damage here. And that 2d6 plus the damage would need to equal to do 1 damage, or beat to do 1 plus the extra damage of your wounds here. So if a damage came in on this commander, someone rolls 10 on 2d6 plus 8, if that was the attacker's damage as well. 18 damage on him would mean that it's doing 1 damage for equaling his soak, and then another 4, so 5 damage in total. By doing 18 on him. Obviously that's old school grunts as well, no difference in that really. I've always run the game so that if you equal the soak you do 1 point of damage and everything above is additional damage on the target. This is where we've changed things. Rather than having a shoot and an assault and a skill separately, I've just reduced it down to 1, which is just skill, and that's used for shooting, assault, and other situational things. So, if you're asked to make a skill check because you're targeting missiles or something along those lines, you use your skill as well. And so it's 1 factor of skill, and in this instance, the commander's is 7, which is very, very good. Metal, as I said, is essentially what was called mental before, but we've gone for metal this time. It just came to me. I thought I'd call it metal. It feels right, and move is your traditional move. Weapons now all have increments on the ranges, so you can fire out to quite extreme ranges with a minus. And there's some special features there called orders. That means that, as essentially we've said before, commanders can clear off shock, and also they can assign a command token to a squad too. So coming down to this squad, I've just put that table on there showing the squad bonus as well. So these recon squads, guard of 14, soak 12, skill is 6. But since this recon squad here is a squad of 8, 8 boxes to fill in, they would be using a +2 to their skill roll when they're firing and they're fresh. As soon as they start to lose models, they drop down to the +1 skill roll. So if this model was firing their personal weapon, I haven't called the weapon a specific thing, so personal would be like an assault rifle or something. I haven't gone into that level of detail yet. So if they're using the personal weapon, damage is +6, so they'd roll 2d6 if they hit a target. They'd add that damage, and depending, sorry, step back a moment. When they're making their attack roll with that rifle and shooting, they use their skill, and then you measure, and then you'd minus off that skill. So if it was 30 inches out for this personal weapon, it would be -2 off that skill, so it'd be down to 4 before they've rolled. And then if they were targeting something with a guard of 14, and they rolled 2d6, they're obviously only going to add 4 to their roll, because they've got a -2 to hit another target that just happened to have the 14 for their guard as well. Now, what that means, as I said earlier, is that while a squad is fresh, they're very effective at doing well at longer ranges earlier in the game, because they can add that +3 to their skill roll. But as I said before, they can only use the squad bonus when they're fresh. So as soon as you've had some incoming fire and you've got not injury, not waxed models, but when you've had incoming fire and you're in a shocked condition because you've got a shock token on them because they've taken damage from incoming fire, they then can't apply their squad bonus because they're shaken up. So you need to be sort of free from suppression in regard to shock being assigned to the model. Then you get your squad bonus. So yeah, I mean, it's very useful to know, and it's really helped us while we play in that being able to reduce a squad's effectiveness, because I always wanted to do this in the original Grunts, and obviously you did it essentially by when you hit a squad, you'd be taking models off, and you knew as soon as you took a model off a Grunt squad, it was going to have one less attack roll back at you. So that was kind of reducing its effectiveness. But now it's suppressing it, so it's got less potential to put fire back on you from the suppression with the shock token anyway, because they only get one action, they can't do the let rip. Plus, they're not going to get any of their skill bonuses while they're in that shocked condition as well. So it does really sort of differentiate things and makes you want to drop in some damage on a unit to basically grind it down a bit. Otherwise, there's no other real great big differences. I mean, have a read of these, and what I'm going to suggest you do is basically match something closely, rather than go off and say, oh, I've now got a mecha something else, I need to like roll a whole new set of stats up. Please use these instead and proxy in something suitable. So for example, this human force, I've added a medium ground tank, and it uses the same critical points as before in the original rules, but again it just has the skill now, and the squads use just the skill too. And then the movement details are on there, but then I've got the different weapons. It's got a direct energy weapon, it's got the range increment, so you can see at 56 inches it would be -3 to shoot, and that would be -3 off its skill of 5. Weapon 2 as a support weapon, it has auto fire rather than armor piercing, and then weapon 3 is a short range missile which has area effect. So armor piercing takes a minus off the soak of the target before you roll your damage. Auto fire, now I'm going to suggest you don't use this on your first game, but have a look at the auto fire rules. They're written up in the main doc, and I won't go into that detail now. And area effect, again, have a look in the doc on area effect, and it's quite different in a way than what it was before, so it's worth having a read of that. And then criticals for the moment, and this was Matt Hay gave me this suggestion a long time ago, that there were 2 grades of criticals. So for these larger vehicles which have several lines of criticals, they could potentially take 2 levels of critical on each system before it's really knackering them, essentially. This is kind of up for debate still, so feedback welcome on that. Items like this that aren't core to my rules, I'm a lot more flexible with if people have good ideas, because the sort of core mechanisms of activating, shooting, the stats, I'm trying to keep those as close to the original Grunts, with some tweaks, as you've seen, like combining the shooting and assaulting down into one, just to make it easier, that there's just a quality really of the squad. However, bits and pieces like adding a little crunch and interest to the game through different methods for doing criticals, I'll be very interested to hear people's feedback on. And this sort of aspect of it is where I've not spent as much time, just simply because I'd like the core to feel really strong in terms of moving models and assault with grunts, which is the main aspect of the role. But of course it's a combined arms game, and the vehicle action has to work as well, and that's where feedback on the way the criticals work would be interesting. I've also not shared all the perks yet. So you've got the outline rules. Some of these have perks on them, but there are new perks, and I've written an awful lot that try and tweak up the game a bit. But this one, for example, has the toughened, and when this unit takes damage, your opponent must reroll the single highest damage dice and use that result. That's quite a powerful one, but that's because it's a power armor squad, and it's a squad of just 4 here. Oh, that's worth mentioning, I haven't got the points on here. So everything does have new points, but I'm not putting them on there for this stage of the playtest either, just because I just want people to throw dice and have fun, and feedback on how it's played out. And you can balance the forces or play some asymmetry, however you want to do it, in terms of having heavier numbers on one side. But at the moment there's no points, but obviously a power armor squad like this, it's got a guard of 14 but also a soak of 14, very good skill, very good metal, good weaponry, and also this potential to be toughened, which means they're hard to take out. But obviously if you fill your table with power armor squads, it's obviously a very tough squad to take down. So be careful, if you let someone have, 4 or 5 scout squads or something on their recon on their side, and you fill your side with power armor, they're going to be tough cookies to break. But that's another aspect of the new rules, really trying to focus to add differentiators for key unit types like power armor. What really makes them good might be adding these perks that just makes them a bit harder to kill, a bit tougher, rather than in my regional rules, the old version of Grunts, I may have just whacked up the soak, and then I could have given them there's probably a perk that I may have given them, like a jump or something, because many of the Ground Zero games power armors have like jump packs and things. I'd have given them jump to make them able to get in a bit quicker. But I didn't really think about differentiators, so now with these perks like toughened, it means that you've just got that different feel to a squad. Although, of course, the thing with perks and the points of them, you could put that toughened on an alien Xeno type squad because they've got thick skin, but they may be really fast movers with hardly any soak because they're weak. But for some reason, you give them toughened because it just meant that they take bullets and they don't suffer the same as us humans. Maybe they've got 2 hearts, one in their lungs and one further down somewhere in the tail root or something. So that's the kind of feel that I'm trying to put differentiators in there. But again, I'm not sharing all the perks yet, but they'll come very soon, I'm sure. I'm just at the moment sharing these stats. So that's the sort of single page of the human type forces. There's a mecha there. I suggest reading through these. I won't go into full detail right now. Okay, so that's that. You will find lots of rough edges actually, where, because I haven't brought everything together as cleanly as I'd like, you may find I've written something daft on here, like I've written when taking the advanced action down here, when taking advance and engage, and that should just be assault. But that was, as I said, we had different terminology for a while where we were working through this, and I've adjusted that again, but I haven't caught up with all of the documents to make it perfect yet. And then these, I've called these stats for Xeno. Basically, we were using crusty forces from Ground Zero Games. And when this, like for example up here, it says crusty infantry, 12 per squad. You don't have to have 12. We were just playing it because we wanted big squads with low skill. So these have got skill of 4, and that's what to bear in mind with this. We wanted large squads of 12, and these were all single based. And it just meant how we were grinding them down, you know, how effective were they when they had really low soak and terrible skills because they weren't shooting very well. They had to get in very close before they could be effective with a skill 4 because, you know, out here with a skill 4 at 30 inches, you're only rolling 2 plus your dice roll. And their metal wasn't very good, so when you got to half strength, they quite often broke. So, yeah, that's how we played them. You could say, I'm not using crusties here, but I've got a militia type squad of 12 or, you know, 8, you choose at the moment, because the points aren't on there. You could say to yourself, I've got squads of 8, and when they get to half strength, they'll be on 4 boxes left, essentially. Again, weapons, I have started to detail out the different weapon types, but at the moment I've just said personal in there, and the range is applied for that. And what else? I mean, the commander we were using was a drone commander and that had hover kind of ability. So we gave him this jump perk, so when taking the move out, or just a move action, it could ignore intervening terrain, but it must start and end the movement in good or open terrain, and may still assault after movement. So essentially, this just gave it that little bit of an edge and a differentiator on movement because it was a floating drone commander with weaponry sort of stacked on the side of it. And where else to talk on here? There are crusty power armor as well, so they've got their own kind of power armor. Again, the skill's a bit lower. They don't have that toughened on them, so they've got a higher soak, but I haven't added the toughened perk, but I have given them highly motivated, which means at the start of their activation, the unit may take 1 wound to remove all shock tokens. And that's just that way of saying, right, we'll leave that man dead and behind, and we'll keep on running. And that means we'll keep our motivation up while we do that. So that's a new perk that's come in. And again, I've put that squad bonus to say that, you know, when they're at size 8+, they get a +2. Just as a reference on there, really. That's not specific to this squad. That's just a reference again of that squad bonus, which is key now that you're firing only 1 attack dice for a full squad, because that's what's representing your different sizes as you work through it. Plus, of course, larger squads stay around longer. That's the 2 differentiators. You've got a large squad, it takes longer to wipe it off the table, therefore it's able to output more firepower for its size of, say, 8 or 12. Plus, they get this skill bonus, which is the key differentiator on there. So again, as I said, this is like a quick fire Xeno force here, an alien or weaker skilled, larger mass infantry. That was the idea of the sort of asymmetry between the human force stats and these. The humans were a bit more highly skilled, smaller, tougher, and these Xeno ones were larger massed troops where you needed a lot of squaddies around to able to plink any damage in. You know, the classic differentiator, isn't it? You have you have bigger numbers, but you're slightly worse at hitting the side of a barn door, hence stormtroopers. But there's nothing to do with any Star Wars in here, by the way, just before anybody hits me with licensing. Yeah, so that's generally the view. What else they've got in here? They have got some mobile direct fire in the form of kind of more small mecha walkers. Again, you could use anything for spider droids, anything for that. And they also have squad attachments here. And the rules, I'm not going to go into squad attachments in this. I call it a brief chat. I'll probably be talking for 2 hours. But I won't go into squad attachments. But they're in the rules if you want to read them and ask questions and try it out. But basically, squad attachments allow you to add that single attachment to a squad, but they can have independent wounds, they can fire on independent models, but they do activate and move with that squad. And in the case of using these spider droids, it's about suppressive heavy laser fire because they get auto fire too. And if you read the auto fire rules, you'll see that they're quite different now in the sense that it's all about suppressing by applying shock. That's what the auto fire will do, and then it has a chance then of damaging as well. So the focus has been on, if you've got something that's spraying heavy fire about, you're really making the enemy suppressed. In traditional armed combat, it keeps their head down, but also does have a chance of injuring them as well. So that's what auto fire is focused on. Again, it's another differentiator. You know, what does auto fire do different from normal? And it's just saying here that a squad attachment may make a ranged attack against a different target. So whereas we've said all along, this squad leader is firing out and shooting, when you're firing that squad attachment, it's firing itself as well from its position. We tried a couple of things with that. We tried at first saying that the squad attachment just added that function to the squad, but it was still shooting from the squad leader's position. So that's still up for debate, but play it as is at the moment, which means if you have a squad attachment of a spider droid on here as well, it would be able to fire at a separate target from its position. Right, I don't think I'm going to waffle anymore. I'm just going to say very briefly, I've got the turn sequence in here. I'd really like people to use the cards, because we've been using the cards a lot, and it's really feeling good activating on cards. And I've always played it with playing deck cards, and then rather than, you know, just alternating by choice, you put the cards down on the squads. It just feels more fun. Especially, and this is really an interesting key point, I'm going to focus on my face for it as well. A key point for me is that I like games which are fun in larger groups, and the original Grunts, obviously it feels like a two-player game, doesn't it? You know, it's traditional. That's what the old classics like 40k and things are. They really are just focused on two groups. But when you use the cards and you're activating units randomly, it's fantastic for group games, just to get more people into a game. So I've played great games at the club and lots of show games where I've done conventions, where it's just got everybody into the game, because you flip over, you know, they're in charge of a particular unit, and that unit's activated when the card flips over for them, and they feel like they're engaged, they're in the game. Oh, my cards come up, I'm playing. They're not sitting there having to say, oh, could I go now before you move that unit? Could I go? You're not having to try and break down a game that's traditionally only two-player. You're just being able to just get everybody involved, and the rules are showing you when to play, because you fire over that either playing card you can use. There's rules for playing cards in the original Grunts, or the official cards which I've had printed. Either way, they make the game work really well for a large group. So, and it's a key point I always want to like sell. So I'm just saying that now. Anyway, you probably know that too. I don't know why I'm trying to sell things now, because I'm just showing you these rules, but it's late. Back to what I've sent on there. Okay, so yeah, there's another one on here which shows how to start a game, and it's really quick and simple, and that's something again you'd want beside when you're playtesting. Print that out, because it's just, you know, roll for initiative, assign your activation tokens or cards if you're using the cards, and then, you know, work through it from there. That covers your basics for turn sequence. And this is it. These are the outline rules. So how many pages are there? 20 odd pages, 36 pages. Now, of course, that's 36 pages of the leanest writing ever, which a friend of mine helped me with in terms of the wording and laying it out just as the basic outline. But the other docs that will come, and this is just the first one, it doesn't have the perks in here, and it doesn't have all the stats and stuff in here either. So this is just the outline rules. And some of it is still draft, a lot of it's still draft, and also the main rule book is like 100 and odd pages worth. When this gets laid out into the main rule book, it's going to have a lot of work, lots of feedback from players from this group. Losing my voice, need a drink. But all the basics are in here and described. So again, some things won't make any sense because they don't mean anything. So you've got super light, light, medium, heavy. Well, that's only useful to you when I provide the stats later on, beyond the playtest stats that I've got up there. And again, it's telling you speed, guard, soak, skill, metal, as we mentioned before, and wounds. And then we've just got what skill tests are, what opposed rolls might happen, measuring. Everything's in here. Unit coherency, as I mentioned. But again, for quick view on things like unit coherency, not squad actions, that. Dive into this charts view because you've got 6 different charts on this page that 8 different charts that show you the basics. But yeah, have a read through. What you may find is, I think I mentioned already, the vehicle rules have different terminology, like this dazed, slow, vulnerable, panicked status, and that's sort of gone now. But it's kind of represented by the minuses that I've put on the cards. But it's an area I'd really like feedback on, just in terms of how you damage and do criticals on vehicles. I know people have got ideas on that, so I'd welcome them. And then setup, which I said before, you've got that chart I've done on the setup as well, and turn sequence. Oh, there is something I have to show you. So anyway, I won't go into any more on the book piece. It's not a book anyway, it's just the outline at the moment, and I've got it's very draft. But I nearly forgot. Must share this before moving on, because it's absolutely key, and it's brutal in Grunt's version 2, which is getting into close combat. And again, I felt in the original Grunts, through loads of play, that it just grinded sometimes when you had squads that essentially they've got high-powered weapons that if you stand near each other and any kind of actions going on, you're likely to rip each other to shreds in one way or another. So it's now very brutal, and essentially I did cover that earlier where I said, get within 1 inch and you take that deliberate assault action. You're within 1 inch, you can pre-measure, you're moving your squad leader within 1 inch of any model on the target, not just the squad leader, and then you're just making an assault roll. But of course you're adding that squad bonus based on the size of your squad, if you're not obviously shocked when you're making that charge. So the squad bonus gets added to this roll if you choose all the damage roll. But it's most likely in an assault that you'd want to add any squad bonus to the actual assault roll, because it makes it much more effective, which you'll see with the new results of squads assault. And it's much more simple than the last chart for this was all over the shop, really. I think this is a lot easier, hopefully anyway. So basically, you 2d6 and you add that skill. 1 roll for the full squad. Again, as I've mentioned with shooting, it's 1 roll for the full squad on a shot or assault. But you add the squad bonus, as I've said before, to whatever their skill is. And within close combat now, if you basically don't equal or beat the guard of the defender, it's still a normal hit. So essentially, it's just grades of carnage rather than you've just sent 7 guys, 10 guys in with assault rifles. They've stood next to another squad and no one's died. It's much more brutal. Basically, if you hit, it's basically a miss, essentially, because you don't have to hit as high as their guard. Only snake eyes means you'll result in nothing happening, but you'd at least get a hit on there. Then you'd roll your 2d6 and add the close assault weapon damage to it, to try and beat their soak as per normal Grunt's rules. But a crit is now in close assault if your skill plus modifiers is equal or greater than the guard or defender. So that's not that hard to get. Surprisingly, as we've played, it doesn't always come up, but it does mean you then roll 3d6 and add the close combat weapon damage. So rather than 2d6, when you score a hit, it's up to 3d6. And it's just a lot more carnage. It didn't strip models straight off the table, but you can certainly end up with doing a lot more of an injury. Now we've got Ultra Crit, which is if you get boxcars a double 6 on the assault, plus your modifiers, and they're equal or greater than the guard of defender. You roll 2d6, but rather than it just being this extra d6 that you get on a crit, it's 2d6 and you add a full 6, so the third 6 is essentially maxed out. That bonus damage is maxed out to 6, plus the combat weapon damage too. So it really is nasty if you go in and you manage to get a double 6 on your assault rolling plus skill. You will do a lot of damage in that instance. So crit damage, though, is quite easy to get with the 3d6 roll, which still makes close assault very effective. But everything I've said so far about the way that you suppress squads, you grind them down with fire from a long range, you try and get them shocked before they're near you so they can't use their squad bonus on their assault. It really does make it quite hard to get in close. There's a lot of things in the way between you and getting into that 1 inch space between a squad, but if you do, it's then nice and decisive. Really, it made for a decisive game. Basically, as we've been playing through the summer. And then this is just a damage outcome. So basically, have you damaged the defender? Yes, they get a shock token. Are they at breakpoint? So if they were, they'd make a metal test and they could break straight away and be off, and they won't get to respond. But if they haven't made a breakpoint and they're not damaged, they can make a reaction and go straight into their assault roll against you. So basically, it's coming back at you. If you haven't got that damage in on them. And after defenders complete their assault, and if both squads still have members, you just separate the squad leader by pushing them back another inch to indicate they've ended the assault action, and then they're kind of broken apart. But we find that doesn't always happen a lot because it's quite brutal now in terms of the damage going in. But at the same time, it still can result in not a complete wipeout every time, which is what we've been playing towards. But again, that's what the playtest's for. Let's see how people feel as they go through this. It certainly feels decisive to play it now. But at the same time, it didn't feel like overkill. But it did make the fact that people were toe-to-toe, tooth, claw, and essentially that's one thing to remember, actually. Let me go back to meme briefly. There's this thing, isn't there, with the old classic 40k type games, when they talk about close combat, it's always like, oh, you've got a power sword or a power fist or a claw. Whereas in Gruntz, that's not the case. It's basically when you're close in, you're using everything they've got. So if they've got an assault rifle, anything else in their hands, everything's going into play. Although you're using their melee damage output in the statistics row, it's essentially everything's out, pistols, punching, knives, the lot. And again, because it's kind of abstracted a little, you don't necessarily have to have those specific weapons on there. Although in the stats for weapons, you have got different grades of close assault. So if it was a powered armor unit, you could call it power claws, but it would have a higher rating for its close assault because it's just really is, or as an alien Xeno with tooth and claws, you would boost up its close assault damage output simply because you wanted to represent that it was a terrible thing to be close to. But it does mean, obviously, when things get in close, they do a lot of damage to each other, and that's how the focus has gone so far on the new rules. And it's just felt like it's freed it up a lot, and feels a lot fresher to play, and rather less of the sort of bogging down where you've got down to like 2 or 3 guys left aside that's been standing toe to toe for 2 or 3 turns, which I found I used to stumble along quite a lot when I was playing the old version of Gruntz, and now it feels like it's more decisive and more likely that at most you'll have a couple of rounds close assault between 2 squads. They'll break apart, or one unit will break, or one unit will be wiped out. One of the two just makes it a bit of a cleaner game. Right, those are the squads. Go to there, go to Raspberry Pi, and that's me. I've finished. So thanks very much, really. I should be back on myself to say thank you. I'm just having another quick look through here. I mean, you'll get all these files, and like I said, please use proxy in stuff for what's in here, rather than go, oh, I've got a game and I really want a mecha with 50 guns and things. Please just try and play with this for a while. And if you don't have exactly a medium ground tank and you've got a heavy one, well, just use the medium ground tank stats, see how it plays. And likewise, if you've got 2 light APCs on here, just use something relevant. They can carry a squad in there. And in fact, over here again, I've got this mecha support, which I've called a hunter droid, which I was using that kind of like grav single droid thing, Empire Strikes Back, floating around the ice world type droid thing for that. But you could use any kind of walking, flying, small droid thing to represent this, and it's got an incredibly fast move, good accuracy on the laser with a skill of 6, and is quite a nasty unit to have flying around and pinning in, trying to get into rear arcs and doing damage. Oh yes, read the rules on the rear arcs. You, although squad fire is 360 based on the squad leader, if you start and finish your turn in the rear arc of another squad leader, you do get a bonus on the attack and damage. Really is effective to try and get into the rear arc of something now, so that's been adjusted a bit, and it'd be interesting to get feedback on that. Right, so really we'll go back to me now because I'm drying up here. That's it. So thanks for listening, watching, trying the playtests. This is only being shared privately. Please don't share with the world at the moment, me rambling on here. Just to appreciate patience as well, and feedback for this. I'm sending a link also to a Google Doc sheet which you can go into and add your feedback line by line. So rather than blasting in the chat group, what about this, what about that, put your questions, comments and items in there. Obviously I'll answer the odd question in the chat thread or in the secret playtest group, but at the same time it's easier for me if you feedback in that document, put your name on it, and then I can answer in my own time rather than feeling like I'm a slave to Facebook. I can go through, but also then it's not a ticketing, I'm not a software support company with a ticket desk, but it means you've got a log number in there. I've put the IDs on those line entries in the sheet, and it means it's registered for all to see. Other people can mull it over. Other people might have a response. I'll probably respond, and then if I've adjusted the rules, I'm even going to write in that sheet rules adjusted based on this, etc. And of course, everybody in this playtest group will get their name in the book with a thank you. And if you've particularly come up with lots of exciting ideas, I may even name one of them after you or do something along those lines. Obviously, this is a niche product, so getting your name in it isn't like fanfare for the world, but hopefully you appreciate that. I do appreciate your input into it, and we'll acknowledge that too. So thanks very much.